sound of a phone ringing in the darkness, abruptly cutting through the silence. My name is Alex Morgan. I'm an investigative journalist, and what you're about to hear may be the most important story humanity has ever needed to know. It's July 15th, 2025, and in exactly 4 months, our world may change forever. But let me start at the beginning. At 3:17 a.m. Eastern Time, my phone shattered the silence of my Washington, D.C. apartment. The caller ID showed a number I recognized immediately. Dr. David Chen, NASA Ames Research Center. David and I have history. We met 12 years ago when I was covering the Mars Perseverance rover missions. He was a junior astrophysicist then. Brilliant, ambitious, with an infectious enthusiasm for the cosmos. Over the years, he became my most trusted source inside NASA. Not for leaks, mind you, but for translation. When I needed to understand the science behind the headlines, David was my bridge between complex astrophysics and public comprehension. But David had never called me at 3 a.m., and he had certainly never sounded like this. Alex, his voice was barely above a whisper, strained and hollow. Jesus Christ, Alex, are you awake? I fumbled for the bedside lamp, my journalist instincts already firing despite the fog of sleep. I am now. David, what's wrong? You sound… Listen to me very carefully. The words came fast, urgent, cutting through my confusion like ice water. I can't talk long. They're monitoring everything now. Every call, every email, every fucking conversation. But you need to know. People need to know. The adrenaline hit my system like a shot of espresso. I grabbed a pen from my nightstand. Muscle memory from 20 years in journalism kicking in automatically. Know what? 3I/Atlas, the interstellar object. It's not what they're telling people. I'd heard of 3I/ATLAS, of course. The media had been covering it since its discovery in March. Another interstellar visitor, following in the footsteps of Oumuamua and Borisov. The astronomy community was excited, sure, but it seemed like standard space science fare. A chunk of rock and ice from beyond our solar system, scheduled to make its closest approach to the Sun in November. David, it's just another interstellar comet. No. The force in his voice stopped me cold. No, Alex, it's not. The trajectory data, the spectroscopic analysis, the radio emissions. He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. This thing is under intelligent control. The pen slipped in my suddenly sweaty palm. Outside my apartment window, Washington, D.C., slept peacefully, unaware that one of NASA's senior astrophysicists was having what sounded like a complete breakdown. But David Chen wasn't the type to break down. In 12 years, I'd never heard him so much as exaggerate a temperature reading. What do you mean, intelligent control? I mean, it's been making course corrections since April. Micro adjustments to its trajectory that no natural object should be capable of. I mean, the radio signatures we've been detecting since May aren't random stellar noise. They're structured, mathematical, deliberate. His voice cracked. Alex, we have 4 months before it reaches perihelion. And nobody, not Congress, not the president, not even the people making these decisions, nobody knows what happens next. I found myself pacing now, the 3 a.m. fog completely burned away by adrenaline. David, slow down. Start from the beginning. What exactly are you seeing in the data? Anomalous acceleration patterns. The object has been making 17 distinct trajectory modifications since we started detailed tracking in April. No outgassing, no comet tail, nothing that would explain natural course corrections. And the radio transmissions? His voice dropped to almost inaudible levels. Alex, it's been broadcasting structured signals on the hydrogen line frequency, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, physical constants. We've been monitoring it around the clock since early May. The hydrogen line, 1420.405575 MHz. Even I knew that frequency. It's what SETI researchers call the cosmic telephone number, the frequency that any intelligent civilization would naturally use to announce their presence. Transmitting to where? That's the thing. The signals aren't directional. They're omnidirectional broadcasts, like it's announcing itself to anyone listening, or mapping our electromagnetic environment, learning about us. My apartment suddenly felt very cold. David, why are you telling me this? Why now? Why risk calling me at 3 a.m.? Because in 6 hours, they're implementing what they're calling Information Protocol 7, complete data compartmentalization. Anyone with access to the raw observational data gets reassigned or put on administrative leave. The official narrative becomes the only narrative. David's laugh was bitter, desperate. They want to maintain public stability while they figure out how to spin first contact as manageable. First contact. The words hung in the air like a physical presence, changing the molecular structure of everything around me. David, if this is real, if you're right about this, then people have a right to know. They have a right to prepare. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. Static crackled on the line, and I could hear voices in the background, getting closer. Listen, check your email in 1 hour. I'm sending you everything I can access before they lock me out of the system. Trajectory analysis, spectral data, radio intercepts, thermal imaging, all of it. The raw data they don't want anyone to see. David, wait. Alex, listen to me carefully. In 4 months, on November 15th, 3I/ATLAS reaches its closest approach to the Sun. After that, current models show it continuing toward the outer solar system. But those models don't account for the course corrections we've observed. We have no idea where it's actually going. His voice became urgent, desperate. And the latest trajectory calculations suggest that if it maintains its current pattern of adjustments, it could pass within 0.2 astronomical units of Earth. 0.2 astronomical units, roughly 30 million kilometers. In cosmic terms, that's practically a handshake. One more thing, David whispered, his voice now barely audible. The radio transmissions have been evolving, getting more complex, more sophisticated. Whatever intelligence is controlling this object, it's been studying us, learning about us. And Alex, I think it's trying to communicate. The line went dead. I stood there in my dark apartment, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone and trying to process what I'd just heard. Outside, DC continued its peaceful slumber, completely unaware that everything might be about to change. 4 months, November 15th, 2025. I made coffee and waited for David's email, my hands trembling, not from caffeine withdrawal, but from the sudden weight of what might be the most important story in human history. A story that, if David was right, our own government was desperately trying to hide. As the first hints of dawn began to creep across the Potomac, I realized that the next 4 months would either vindicate everything humanity had ever dreamed about our place in the universe, or reveal that we were catastrophically unprepared for the truth that we are not alone. The countdown had begun. 122 days until November 15th, 2025. Sound fades to the quiet hum of a computer booting up, the soft click of keys as an email inbox loads, sound of computer keys clicking, papers shuffling, coffee brewing in the background. David's email arrived at 4:23 a.m., exactly 66 minutes after our call ended. The subject line was innocuous enough. Quarterly spectral analysis, routine observations. But the attachments told a different story entirely. 31 files, raw telemetry data, spectroscopic readings, orbital mechanics calculations, thermal imaging sequences, and something that made my blood run cold. A folder labeled Classified Eyes Only, Radio Signal Analysis 3, I/Atlas. I spent the next 14 hours buried in data that would normally take a team of astrophysicists weeks to analyze properly. Thank God for that physics degree I earned before switching to journalism, rusty as it was after 2 decades of covering politics and corporate scandals. It was enough to understand what I was looking at, and what I was looking at should not exist. Let me start with the official story, the version you've been hearing since March. 3I/ATLAS was discovered on March 8, 2025, by the Catalina Sky Survey in Arizona. Initial observations classified it as the third confirmed interstellar object to visit our solar system, following 1I/Oumuamua in 2017 and 2I/Borisov in 2019. The International Astronomical Union assigned it the designation 3I/Atlas, the 3I indicating the third interstellar object, and Atlas after the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system that provided follow-up observations. According to NASA's public statements, 3I/ATLAS measures approximately 18 kilometers in length and 6 kilometers in width. Mass estimates place it at roughly 2.3 times 10 to the 12th kilograms, about the size of a small mountain. Spectroscopic analysis indicated a composition consistent with long-period comets, water ice, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and various organic compounds. Standard interstellar debris, they said. Perfectly normal celestial mechanics, they assured us. Every single detail was a lie. The classified data David sent me revealed something far more extraordinary and terrifying. First, the size estimates were deliberately underreported. High-resolution imaging from the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope showed 3I/ATLAS wasn't a single cohesive object at all. It was a complex structure composed of at least 7 distinct modules, each connected by what could only be described as engineered junctions. The largest central module measured 31.7 kilometers in length, with 6 smaller sections arranged in a precise geometric pattern around it, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 2 lateral extensions that gave the entire structure an unmistakably artificial symmetry. The surface wasn't the rough, irregular terrain you'd expect from a natural comet, but showed clear geometric patterns, straight lines, and what appeared to be docking mechanisms between modules. Manufactured edges, I muttered to myself, staring at the enhanced images on my laptop screen. This isn't geology, this is architecture. But the visual evidence was just the beginning. The real smoking gun lay in the trajectory data. To understand why this matters, I need to explain how interstellar objects behave. When Oumuamua visited us in 2017, it caused a sensation precisely because it didn't follow the rules. As it passed the sun, it accelerated away faster than gravity and solar radiation could account for, behavior that suggested either exotic physics or, as Harvard's Avi Loeb controversially proposed, artificial origin. 2I/Borisov, discovered in 2019, was much more conventional. It followed predictable orbital mechanics, showed clear comet characteristics with a visible tail, and behaved exactly as natural debris from another star system should behave. The scientific community breathed a collective sigh of relief. Oumuamua had been an anomaly, but cosmic physics still made sense. 3 I/ATLAS shattered that relief completely. David's trajectory analysis showed something unprecedented: systematic course corrections. Not the single acceleration anomaly that made Oumuamua famous, but 17 distinct modifications to its path since detailed observations began in April. Each adjustment was precisely calculated, moving the object toward an optimal trajectory for solar system exploration. I cross-referenced the data with standard orbital mechanics equations, calculations I hadn't run since graduate school. Natural objects follow gravitational laws with mathematical precision. Comets might show minor variations due to outgassing as they approach the Sun, but those changes are chaotic, unpredictable. What I was seeing in 3 I/ATLAS's trajectory was the opposite: deliberate, purposeful navigation. April 15th. Velocity adjustment of 0.3 meters per second, duration 14 minutes, I read from David's analysis. April 23rd. Course correction of 0.7 degrees, executed over 47-minute period. May 2nd. Deceleration burn, reducing approach velocity by 1.2 meters per second over 23 minutes. 17 corrections, each one precisely timed, perfectly executed, and completely impossible for a natural object. The spectroscopic data revealed more impossibilities. When astronomers analyze the composition of comets, they look for specific molecular signatures, the fingerprints of elements and compounds that tell the story of solar system formation. Standard comets show predictable ratios of water, carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia, with trace amounts of heavier elements. 3 I/ATLAS showed these expected signatures, yes, but also displayed absorption lines that matched no known natural materials. The James Webb Telescope's infrared spectrometer had detected complex carbon-based molecules with isotopic ratios that suggested industrial processing rather than stellar nucleosynthesis. Most puzzling were spectral lines that indicated the presence of artificial elements, isotopes that don't occur naturally and have half-lives too short to survive interstellar travel unless actively maintained. Refined metals, I whispered, scrolling through page after page of spectroscopic data. Synthetic polymers, industrial ceramics. This isn't a comet, it's a manufacturing catalog. The thermal analysis was perhaps most damning of all. Natural comets are essentially dirty snowballs. When they approach the Sun, solar radiation heats their surfaces, causing sublimation that creates the characteristic tail. Heat distribution should be simple, hottest at the sun-facing side, cooling gradually toward the shadow regions. 3 I/ATLAS showed active thermal management. The surface temperature was remarkably uniform across the entire structure, maintained at an optimal 289 Kelvin, roughly 16 degrees Celsius, or room temperature. Internal heat sources were distributed throughout the object in geometric patterns, suggesting controlled environmental systems maintaining habitable conditions. Life support, I said aloud to my empty apartment. They're running life support systems. But it was the radio data that removed any remaining doubt that we were dealing with something beyond natural explanation. Since May 12th, 3 I/ATLAS had been transmitting structured radio signals on multiple frequencies. The primary transmission occurred at 20.40575 MHz. The hydrogen line, the frequency that SETI researchers have been monitoring for decades as the most likely channel for extraterrestrial communication. The mathematical sequences were unmistakable. Prime numbers from 2 to 97. The Fibonacci sequence extending to the 43rd term. Physical constants expressed in binary notation. The speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second. Planck's constant, 6.62607015 times 10 to the negative 34th power. Joule seconds, the fine structure constant, 7.297352566 times 10 to the power of -3. They're showing us they understand physics, I realized, analyzing the signal patterns. Universal constants that any scientifically advanced civilization would recognize. But the transmissions had evolved significantly over the past 2 months. The early signals in May were simple, basic mathematical concepts, like a primer for establishing communication. By June, they had progressed to more complex information. 3-dimensional coordinate systems mapping nearby star systems, spectral analysis data that perfectly matched our sun's emission profile, and detailed radio frequency scans of Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. Most recently, beginning July 3rd, just 12 days ago, the signals had taken on an entirely new character. Instead of mathematical proofs or stellar cartography, 3I/ATLAS began broadcasting what could only be described as music. Complex harmonic structures that followed no terrestrial musical tradition, yet conveyed unmistakable emotional content. Rising crescendos that felt like celebrations or greetings. Gentle melodic passages that reminded me of lullabies my mother used to sing. Rhythmic patterns that seemed to pulse with life itself, as if the entire structure was breathing. Art, I breathed, listening to David's audio recordings through my headphones. They're not just proving intelligence, they're sharing culture. I spent hours analyzing the mathematical beauty of these transmissions. The harmonic ratios followed principles that human composers had discovered independently: the golden ratio, perfect fifths, mathematical relationships that create beauty regardless of the species perceiving them. This wasn't random noise or even structured data transmission. This was aesthetic communication from a civilization that understood beauty. The implications were staggering. We weren't dealing with a robotic probe or an automated system. The complexity and emotional sophistication of these transmissions suggested a crew, potentially an entire civilization, traveling through space with the deliberate intention of making contact. As I compiled this evidence, cross-referencing David's classified data with publicly available observations, one fact became inescapably clear. 3I/ATLAS was not a comet, not a natural object, and certainly not the harmless space debris that NASA was describing to the public. It was a spacecraft, a vessel carrying intelligent beings who had traveled between the stars to reach us. They had been studying us for months, learning our physics, our technology, our culture. The radio transmissions were their attempt to establish communication using the universal languages of mathematics, science, and art. But if this was true, if we were witnessing humanity's first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, then why was our government working so desperately to hide it from the world? The answer to that question would prove even more disturbing than the evidence of alien intelligence itself. Sound of papers being shuffled, a coffee cup being set down, the distant hum of a computer processing data. 121 days until November 15th, 2025. Sound of radio static, then a clear, rhythmic beeping pattern that fades to background. The first signal was detected at 0734 UTC on May 12, 2025, by Dr. Sarah Martinez at the Greenbank Observatory in West Virginia. She was conducting routine observations of 3I/ATLAS when her equipment registered something that shouldn't exist. artificial radio emissions from what was supposed to be a chunk of interstellar ice and rock. I managed to reach Dr. Martinez through encrypted channels 3 days after David's initial contact. One of the advantages of covering space science for 15 years is knowing which researchers still believe in scientific transparency over institutional loyalty. What she told me, speaking from her car in a McDonald's parking lot 30 miles from Green Bank, changed everything I thought I knew about our cosmic visitors. "I thought it was interference at first," she said, her voice barely audible over the phone's encryption static. "We get false signals constantly, satellites, cell towers, teenagers with ham radios, but this was different. The signal was coming from the exact coordinates of 3I/ATLAS, and the signal strength was consistent with transmission from that distance. The frequency was unmistakable, 1420.40575 MHz, the hydrogen line, the 21-centimeter wavelength that hydrogen atoms emit when their electrons flip spin states, a frequency that permeates the universe and would be recognized by any technological civilization. SETI researchers have called it the cosmic telephone number for decades, the frequency any extraterrestrial intelligence would naturally choose to announce their presence. The modulation was clearly artificial," Martinez continued, glancing nervously at the observatory buildings visible in the distance. "Perfect square wave pulses, precise timing intervals, mathematical progressions. No natural phenomenon produces signals like that. I recorded everything, ran it through our analysis software, and immediately called my supervisor. Within 6 hours, Martinez was informed that her observations were classified under something called Information Protocol 7, and that all data related to 3I/ATLAS radio emissions was now the exclusive domain of a joint NASA-NSA task force. She was reassigned to pulsar research and instructed never to discuss her findings with anyone outside official channels. But Martinez had made copies. The initial transmission lasted exactly 47 minutes and consisted of a repeating pattern that any mathematician would recognize instantly. Short pulses arranged in groups corresponding to prime numbers. 2 pulses, pause. 3 pulses, pause. 5 pulses, pause. 7, 11, 13, 17, continuing methodically up to 97, the largest prime number under 100. Then the entire sequence would repeat. It was beautiful, Martinez told me, and despite everything, the secrecy, the fear, the career destruction she was risking, I could hear wonder in her voice. Mathematical perfection transmitted across the void. Whoever sent that signal knew we would recognize the pattern. They were introducing themselves through the universal language of mathematics. The second transmission, detected on May 19th by the Arecibo Successor Facility in Puerto Rico, was more sophisticated, still on the hydrogen line frequency, but now carrying complex encoded information within the signal modulation. Dr. James Patterson, one of the few radio astronomers with clearance to continue monitoring 3I/ATLAS, had conducted the analysis before his own security restrictions were implemented. Patterson's classified report, which David had somehow accessed and included in his data dump, revealed that the May 19th signal contained what appeared to be a stellar navigation chart. Binary data encoding the positions, spectral classifications, and relative distances of 47 nearby star systems, accurate to within current observational margins of error. The chart was centered on our local stellar neighborhood, with our sun clearly identified by its unique spectral signature. They know where they are, Patterson had written in his report. More significantly, they know where we are. By early June, 31/ATLAS was transmitting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The Parkes Observatory in Australia detected coordinated signals at 327 MHz, 1667 MHz, and 2380 MHz, frequencies associated with hydroxyl radicals, water masers, and formaldehyde transitions, respectively. Each frequency carried different data streams, as if the object was broadcasting a comprehensive scientific library on every channel we might be monitoring. The most sophisticated decryption work was being conducted at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory headquarters in Charlottesville, Virginia, under the direction of Dr. Elena Vasquez, arguably the world's leading expert in SETI signal analysis. Her encrypted reports, obtained through channels I still cannot safely identify, revealed findings that should have made headlines around the globe. The June transmissions contained fundamental physical constants expressed with precision that exceeded our own measurements in some cases. The speed of light in vacuum, 299,792,458 meters per second, transmitted as a binary ratio. Planck's constant, 6.62607015 times 10 to the power of negative 34 joule-seconds, encoded with 17 decimal places of accuracy. The fine structure constant, 1 divided by 137.035999084, a dimensionless number that governs electromagnetic interactions throughout the universe. Whoever is transmitting these signals possesses a deep understanding of physical laws, Vasquez had written in a report dated June 15th. The precision of their constants suggests measurement capabilities far beyond our current technology. We are being contacted by a scientifically advanced civilization. But it was the transmission detected on June 23rd that fundamentally changed the nature of the communication. At 1422 UTC, radio telescopes worldwide detected something unprecedented from 3I/Atlas. The object began broadcasting on frequencies used by human technology, not the cosmic background frequencies that any civilization might naturally choose, but the specific bands allocated to Earth's telecommunications infrastructure. It started with AM radio, 535 to 1705 kHz, then FM radio, 88 to 108 MHz, television broadcast frequencies, cellular phone bands, Wi-Fi channels, GPS navigation signals. For 8 hours and 16 minutes, 3I/ATLAS systematically scanned the entire electromagnetic spectrum used by human civilization, transmitting test signals and analyzing the responses. It was mapping our technology, Dr. Martinez had explained during our second encrypted conversation, learning our communication protocols, cataloging our capabilities, like conducting a comprehensive survey of human technological development. The scanning wasn't passive observation. According to intercepted NSA communications that David had somehow accessed, the object was actively probing our systems. Cellular towers reported brief, unexplained synchronization requests. Satellite operators detected unauthorized diagnostic queries. GPS networks experienced momentary timing calibrations that improved accuracy before returning to normal parameters. It was interfacing with our infrastructure, one NSA technician had reported, not attacking, not disrupting, communicating, running compatibility checks on our entire global communications grid. The implications were staggering. Not only were we dealing with an intelligence advanced enough to travel between stars, but they were demonstrating intimate knowledge of human technology acquired through systematic observation and analysis. The most recent phase of transmissions, beginning July 3rd and continuing through the present moment, represented another quantum leap in sophistication. 3I/ATLAS began broadcasting what could only be described as artistic expression. The mathematical sequences and physical constants gave way to complex harmonic structures that transcended mere data transmission. When properly decoded and played through high-fidelity audio systems, the results were nothing short of extraordinary. Music of haunting beauty that seemed to bridge the gap between mathematics and emotion. Dr. Patricia Williams, a former SETI researcher now working independently after losing her security clearance, had been analyzing these audio transmissions using equipment borrowed from the University of California's radio astronomy department. Her preliminary findings, shared through encrypted academic networks, revealed layers of complexity that suggested not just intelligence, but consciousness, creativity, and culture. "It's not one voice," Williams reported in an analysis dated July 10th. "I'm detecting at least 37 distinct harmonic signatures, each with individual characteristics suggesting different personalities, individuals. The complexity implies a diverse civilization with varied forms of expression." The musical transmissions included what Williams described as consensus-building patterns, harmonic structures that suggested dialogue, debate, and collective decision-making, rising themes that felt like questions, responding melodies that seemed to provide answers, and resolution passages that conveyed agreement or understanding. "We're not just receiving signals from an alien spacecraft," Williams had written. "We're eavesdropping on conversations between members of an extraterrestrial civilization. They're discussing something, possibly us, possibly their mission, possibly what they should do next." The emotional content of these transmissions was unmistakable. Joy, curiosity, caution, hope, emotions that transcended species barriers and spoke to universal experiences of consciousness, encountering the unknown. There were passages that felt like children's songs, sections that resembled formal ceremonies, and movements that could only be described as celebrations. But perhaps most remarkably, the transmissions were evolving in real time, responding to events on Earth. When the International Space Station conducted a routine communication test on July 8th, 3I/ATLAS incorporated similar frequency patterns into its next broadcast. When radio telescopes in Chile detected a natural pulsar signal on July 11th, the alien transmissions included mathematical sequences that perfectly predicted the pulsar's timing. "They're listening to us," I realized, reviewing Williams's analysis, "not just scanning our technology, actively monitoring our communications, learning our scientific activities, understanding our level of development." The radio astronomy community's reaction had been swift and predictable. Senior researchers with government contracts fell in line with official narratives about interesting but explainable phenomena. Younger scientists and international observers without security clearances began asking uncomfortable questions. Dr. Liu Wei at the Chinese Academy of Sciences published a paper describing the signals as clearly artificial in origin and inconsistent with known natural phenomena. Dr. Rajesh Patel at the Indian Space Research Organization called for immediate international cooperation in signal analysis and response protocols. Dr. Anna Petrov at the Russian Academy of Sciences declared the transmissions unambiguous evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Within weeks, all three had been denied access to international radio telescope networks. The suppression efforts extended to amateur radio operators and independent researchers. Ham radio enthusiasts who reported receiving fragments of the 3I/ATLAS transmissions found their equipment randomly inspected by FCC officials. University research programs investigating the signals experienced sudden funding cuts. Academic papers on the topic were rejected by major journals without explanation. As I compiled this evidence, listening to hours of recordings that officially didn't exist, the scope of what was happening became clear. We were witnessing the most significant moment in human history. First contact with an extraterrestrial civilization that was actively attempting to establish communication through increasingly sophisticated methods. They had progressed from basic mathematical proofs to complex artistic expression in less than 2 months. They were learning about us, adapting their communication strategies, demonstrating not just intelligence, but wisdom, creativity, and patience. The musical transmissions suggested a civilization rich in culture and individual expression, working collectively to bridge the gap between worlds. And our response? Denial, suppression, and systematic silencing of anyone brave enough to acknowledge the truth. The latest transmission, received just this morning at 06:15 UTC, included something that made my hands tremble as I listened. A perfect reproduction of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, followed by what sounded like their own composition in a similar key and tempo. They weren't just communicating with us, they were trying to connect with us culturally, demonstrating that beauty, harmony, and artistic expression might be universal languages that transcend the barriers between worlds. But only a handful of people on Earth were listening. The rest of humanity remained oblivious to the cosmic conversation taking place above their heads, blocked by governments that had chosen fear and control over wonder and possibility. As I write these words, 3I/ATLAS continues its approach, now just 119 days from its closest encounter with our solar system. The radio transmissions are growing stronger daily, more complex, more urgent. It's as if an entire civilization is preparing for the most important moment in their history, and ours. The question that haunts me is simple. When November 15th arrives, and they reach their closest approach to Earth, will we be ready to answer back? Or will we meet the greatest moment in human history with silence, secrecy, and fear? Sound of radio static intensifying, then fading to a haunting melody that seems almost familiar, 119 days until November 15th, 2025. Sound of encrypted phone calls, document shredders, hushed voices in corridors. The first indication that governments were taking 3I Atlas seriously came not from any official announcement, but from what didn't happen. On June 2nd, 2025, just 3 weeks after the first structured radio signals were confirmed, the European Southern Observatory abruptly cancelled its scheduled press conference about recent interstellar object observations. The given reason: technical difficulties with data verification. That same day, Dr. Sarah Martinez was reassigned from 3I/ATLAS observations to routine pulsar cataloging. Dr. James Patterson at Arecibo 2 found his access to the facility's main array temporarily restricted pending security review. 3 senior radio astronomers at different observatories across 3 continents were simultaneously placed on administrative leave for undefined protocol violations. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordination. Through a network of sources I've cultivated over 15 years of science journalism. Researchers, administrators, security personnel who still believe transparency serves the public interest, I began to piece together the most comprehensive information suppression campaign in modern history. What emerged was an operation that made the Manhattan Project's secrecy look like a high school newspaper. They called it Project Silence. The operation began officially on June 5, 2025, with a classified National Security Council meeting that lasted 11 hours. Present were the President's science advisor, the directors of NASA, NSF, NOAA, and NIH, the heads of the CIA, NSA, and newly formed Space Force Intelligence, and, according to one source, representatives from 12 allied nations via encrypted video link. The meeting's outcome was Presidential Decision Directive 731, a document so classified that merely acknowledging its existence constitutes a federal crime. I've never seen the full text, but I've seen fragments, enough to understand its scope and implications. PDD 731 established a new classification level beyond top secret, designated xenobiological compartmented information, and placed all data related to 3 I/ATLAS under this unprecedented security umbrella. XCI clearance, as it became known within intelligence circles, was granted to fewer than 200 individuals worldwide. Scientists who had spent decades studying interstellar objects suddenly found themselves locked out of their own research. Data they had collected, analyzed, and prepared for publication was seized under national security provisions. Within 48 hours of PDD 731, every major radio telescope facility in the world received identical instructions via secure governmental channels. All observations of 3 I/ATLAS were to be conducted under Information Protocol 7, a classification system that didn't officially exist until June 7th, but had somehow been pre-distributed to facilities across 5 continents. Protocol 7 meant complete information compartmentalization. Scientists could observe, but they couldn't discuss findings with colleagues. They could analyze data, but they couldn't publish results. They couldn't even access their own previous research without direct supervision from newly assigned security liaisons. They installed monitoring software on every computer system, Dr. Martinez told me during our third encrypted conversation, this time from a borrowed phone at a gas station outside Beckley, West Virginia. Keystroke loggers, network traffic analyzers, even audio recording devices in the observation rooms. We went from being scientists to being suspects overnight. The speed of international coordination was unprecedented. Within 1 week of PDD 731, similar directives were issued simultaneously by the European Space Agency, the Chinese National Space Administration, Russia's Roscosmos, and the space agencies of Japan, India, Canada, and Australia. For the first time in human history, every major spacefaring nation had aligned on a single policy: absolute secrecy regarding potential extraterrestrial contact. This wasn't bureaucratic caution. This was systematic, coordinated fear. The legal framework for suppression was already in place, refined through decades of national security law. The Espionage Act of 1917, expanded by post-9/11 legislation, provided broad authority to classify information that might affect national defense. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act criminalized unauthorized access to government data systems. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act allowed monitoring of anyone with potential access to classified information. But Project Silence went far beyond existing legal structures. New provisions were hastily enacted under emergency executive orders. The Scientific Information Security Act made it a federal crime to publish astronomical data without government review. The International Communication Monitoring Enhancement authorized surveillance of all academic and scientific communications. The Technological Infrastructure Protection Directive classified all radio telescope observations as potential national security assets. Within 3 weeks, the legal landscape had been transformed to treat scientific inquiry as potential espionage. The suppression of dissenting scientists began with subtle administrative pressure but quickly escalated to career destruction. Dr. Liu Wei, at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, found his research funding suspended after publishing a paper suggesting the three I/Atlas signals were inconsistent with natural phenomena. Dr. Rajesh Patel's calls for international cooperation resulted in his removal from the Indian Space Research Organization's directorial board. Dr. Anna Petrov was informed by Russian authorities that her comments about extraterrestrial intelligence constituted unauthorized disclosure of state scientific assets. But the Western response was more sophisticated, more psychologically devastating. Rather than overt persecution, dissenting scientists faced systematic professional isolation. Research grants disappeared. Conference invitations were withdrawn. Academic journals rejected papers without explanation. Graduate students were encouraged to find new advisors. Colleagues stopped returning phone calls. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the SETI expert, whose decryption work had revealed the mathematical constants in three I/ATLAS transmissions, became the poster child for what happened to scientists who refused to remain silent. After her security clearance was revoked on June 20th, she attempted to continue her analysis using publicly available data and university resources. The response was swift and brutal. The National Science Foundation informed UC Berkeley that continued employment of researchers who mishandle classified scientific data could jeopardize the university's federal funding. The university offered Vasquez a choice: accept a generous early retirement package with a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, or face termination and possible federal prosecution. She chose retirement and has not been heard from publicly since. Similar pressure was applied to dozens of researchers worldwide. Dr. Michael Foster, at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, was reassigned to administrative duties after questioning the scientific ethics of data suppression. Dr. Jennifer Park, at Caltech, suffered a nervous breakdown after being forced to choose between her security clearance and her scientific integrity. Dr. Robert Steinberg, a veteran radio astronomer, took early retirement rather than participate in what he privately called the greatest scientific cover-up in human history. The pattern was clear: conform to official narratives or lose your career, your research, and your ability to contribute to humanity's understanding of the universe. But suppressing individual scientists was only one aspect of Project Silence. Parallel efforts were underway to control public perception and prepare for contingencies that no one would discuss officially. The Department of Defense established Task Force Atlas, an interagency group tasked with developing response scenarios for anomalous extraterrestrial contact events. According to leaked Pentagon memos obtained through encrypted channels I cannot safely identify, TF Atlas had been wargaming dozens of potential scenarios since mid-June. Scenario Herald assumed hostile reconnaissance by an advance force. Response protocols included immediate mobilization of all available military assets, activation of continuity of government procedures, and implementation of population management strategies in case of widespread panic. The economic analysis alone was sobering. Confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence could trigger market crashes, currency devaluations, and the collapse of entire industries built on assumptions of human technological supremacy. Scenario Shepherd assumed benevolent contact, but recommended maintaining secrecy to prevent social, economic, and religious disruption. The sociological analysis was even more disturbing than the economic projections. Confirmation that humanity wasn't alone could destabilize major world religions, undermine governmental authority, and trigger mass psychological trauma among populations unprepared for cosmic perspective. Perhaps most telling was Scenario Oracle, which assumed the aliens possessed significantly advanced technology and might offer to share it with humanity. The response protocols were unambiguous. Establish immediate government control over all technology transfers. Classify all alien knowledge as state secrets of the highest order, and prevent any unauthorized dissemination of advanced capabilities that could disrupt existing power structures. They weren't just preparing for contact, they were preparing to control it, to monopolize it, to ensure that humanity's first interaction with extraterrestrial intelligence served existing governmental and economic interests rather than the species as a whole. Meanwhile, physical preparations were underway at locations around the globe. Commercial satellite imagery analysis by independent researchers revealed unusual construction activities at several military installations. A new facility at Nevada test site, designated Area 52 in leaked Air Force documents, had been completed in record time using classified construction methods and personnel with the highest security clearances. Similar installations were being constructed simultaneously at Woomera Prohibited Area in Australia, Plesetsk Cosmodrome in Russia, and Kourou Space Center in French Guiana. Each facility featured identical architectural elements: massive clean rooms, electromagnetic isolation chambers, biological containment systems, and what appeared to be communication arrays designed for extremely high-frequency transmission. "They're building reception facilities," explained Dr. James Hartley, a former Pentagon science advisor who spoke to me on condition of absolute anonymity. "Clean rooms for technological analysis, containment systems for biological specimens, communication arrays for direct contact. Everything you'd need to safely examine extraterrestrial technology and establish ongoing dialogue with alien intelligence." The most disturbing aspect of Project Silence wasn't what they were hiding from the public. It was what they were hiding from themselves. According to multiple sources within the intelligence community, the various agencies weren't sharing information with each other. The CIA's analysis of 3I/A TLAS was classified separately from the NSA's signal intelligence, which was compartmentalized from NASA's astronomical data, which was isolated from the Pentagon's military assessments. "Nobody has the complete picture," one intelligence analyst told me during a clandestine meeting in a Washington, D.C. parking garage. "It's the Manhattan Project in reverse. Instead of bringing the best minds together to solve an unprecedented problem, they've scattered the information so widely that no single person understands what we're really dealing with." This compartmentalization wasn't accidental. It was designed to prevent leaks, but it also meant that comprehensive analysis was impossible. Scientists who might have recognized crucial patterns across multiple datasets were kept in isolation. Intelligence analysts who might have understood the implications of the signals weren't allowed to see the astronomical data. Military planners who should have been assessing capabilities were operating with incomplete information about alien intentions. The result was a government apparatus that was simultaneously the most informed and least knowledgeable entity on Earth regarding humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The public disinformation campaign was equally sophisticated. Rather than denying the existence of 3I/ATLAS, which would have been impossible given its visibility to amateur astronomers, official statements consistently downplayed its significance. NASA press releases described it as an interesting but conventional interstellar object exhibiting normal cometary behavior consistent with long-period orbital mechanics. When independent researchers published papers suggesting anomalous characteristics, government-funded scientists were quickly deployed to offer alternative explanations. The radio signals were attributed to unique crystalline structures creating natural resonance phenomena. The trajectory modifications were explained as previously unobserved outgassing patterns typical of carbon-rich cometary composition. The geometric surface features were dismissed as pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive patterns in random natural formations. Each explanation was plausible enough to satisfy casual public interest while being completely inconsistent with the classified data that revealed the true nature of what we were dealing with. The media played their role with depressing predictability. Science journalists, who might have investigated the story more thoroughly, found their sources suddenly unavailable, their interviews cancelled, their access to research facilities restricted. Major news outlets received official statements from NASA, ESA, and other space agencies assuring them that 3I/Atlas posed no unusual scientific interest beyond normal interstellar object research. The few journalists who persisted in investigating anomalies found themselves facing professional pressure remarkably similar to what the scientists were experiencing. Editors killed stories without explanation. Sources stopped returning calls. Interview subjects suddenly became unavailable or claimed they had been misquoted in previous conversations. By July 15th, exactly 1 month after Project Silence was implemented, the information landscape had been completely transformed. The most significant discovery in human history had been reduced to occasional mentions in astronomy blogs and speculation in online conspiracy forums. The signal that should have united humanity in wonder had been buried beneath layers of classification, disinformation, and systematic intimidation. But suppression of this magnitude requires enormous resources and constant vigilance. Cracks were beginning to appear in the facade. Amateur radio operators continued reporting anomalous signals. Independent researchers published analysis through academic networks beyond governmental control. International scientists in countries with less comprehensive suppression apparatus began asking uncomfortable questions about data sharing and transparency. Most significantly, the aliens themselves seemed to be adapting to our secrecy. The recent transmissions included what appeared to be direct attempts to contact civilian populations, broadcasts on commercial radio frequencies, signals timed to coincide with public astronomical events, and even what seemed to be responses to amateur radio transmissions from individual operators. They were trying to establish communication, despite governmental efforts to prevent it. The question was whether Project Silence could maintain information control for another 117 days, until 3I/ATLAS reached its closest approach to Earth, and whatever they were planning came to fruition. As I compiled this evidence, documenting the systematic betrayal of scientific principles and democratic transparency, one fact became inescapably clear. Our governments had made a choice that would define humanity's future. Faced with the greatest moment in our species' history, they had chosen fear over wonder, control over cooperation, and secrecy over the fundamental human right to know that we are not alone in the universe. The countdown continued. 117 days until November 15th, 2025. 117 days until we discovered whether humanity would meet its cosmic neighbors as a free, informed, and unified species, or as subjects kept in ignorance by leaders who believed that the truth was too dangerous for us to handle. Sound of classified documents being sealed in envelopes, secure phones disconnecting, footsteps echoing in empty government corridors, 117 days until November 15th, 2025. Sound of heated academic debate, conference room arguments, keyboards typing furiously in late-night research sessions. The fracture in the global scientific community began on April 23rd, 2025, at 2:47 p.m. GMT, during what should have been a routine International Astronomical Union teleconference about interstellar object classifications. Dr. Kenji Tanaka from the Japanese Space Agency had just finished presenting standard observational data on 31/ATLAS when Dr. Liu Wei from Beijing interrupted with a question that would shatter the facade of scientific consensus. Kenji-san, Dr. Liu's voice crackled through the encrypted video link. Your trajectory data shows 17 distinct velocity changes since discovery. How do you reconcile this with natural cometary mechanics? The silence that followed lasted 43 seconds. I know because I obtained the meeting transcript through sources I still cannot safely identify. 43 seconds of dead air as 127 astronomers from 34 countries processed the implications of what Liu Wei had just revealed. That question marked the beginning of the most bitter scientific controversy since Galileo faced the Inquisition. Within hours, the astronomical community had split into three distinct factions: the conformists who accepted official explanations, the skeptics who questioned the data but remained cautiously diplomatic, and what government documents would later classify as the dissidents, scientists willing to risk their careers to expose what they believed was the greatest cover-up in human history. Today is July 16th, 2025, 117 days until November 15th, and that schism has torn through every major research institution on Earth. The official response to Liu Wei's inconvenient question came swiftly. Within 6 hours of the April 23rd teleconference, Dr. Margaret Stevens from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory published a detailed paper explaining the trajectory anomalies as previously unobserved, outgassing patterns typical of carbon-rich cometary nuclei undergoing asymmetric sublimation during solar approach. Stevens's explanation was scientifically plausible, mathematically elegant, and completely fabricated. I know this because 3 days ago, on July 13th, I received an encrypted message from someone identifying themselves only as JPL Insider, containing Stevens's original analysis, the one she completed before being instructed to revise her conclusions. Her initial findings were unambiguous. The observed trajectory modifications are inconsistent with all known natural phenomena and strongly suggest active propulsion systems. That original report was classified under Information Protocol 7 and replaced with the sanitized version that explained away 17 precise course corrections as random gas jets. Dr. Stevens wasn't alone. Within 2 weeks of Project Silence implementation, prominent astronomers at every major institution were publishing papers that reinterpreted anomalous 3I/ATLAS data through increasingly creative explanations. Dr. Robert Chen at MIT attributed the radio signals to crystalline resonance in exotic ice formations. Dr. Patricia Reyes at ESA dismissed the geometric surface features as statistical clustering of impact craters following power law distribution patterns. The middle ground between compliance and rebellion is occupied by scientists who recognize the anomalies but lack the courage, or perhaps the career death wish, to directly challenge official narratives. These skeptics have developed an elaborate vocabulary of diplomatic dissent, publishing papers that question specific technical details while carefully avoiding the obvious conclusions. Dr. Andreas Müller at the Max Planck Institute represents this faction's approach. His paper, published in the July issue of Astrophysical Journal Letters, is a masterpiece of scientific hedging. While the trajectory modifications of 3I/ATLAS are consistent with known cometary behavior, certain observational parameters suggest the need for expanded theoretical frameworks to fully account for the observed phenomena. Translated from academic diplomatic language, this doesn't make sense, but I'm not going to risk my career saying so directly. The skeptics communicate through code words and implications. Unusual characteristics means impossible behavior. Expanded theoretical frameworks translates to aliens, but I can't say that. Requires further investigation is academic speak for something is very wrong here, but I'm not allowed to investigate further. Dr. Isabella Rossi from the Italian Space Agency has become the unofficial spokesperson for diplomatic doubt. Her presentations at astronomical conferences are studies in careful phrasing. The data presents interesting challenges to our current understanding of interstellar object behavior patterns. She never uses words like artificial or intelligent, but her presentations leave audiences with unmistakable impressions about what she really believes. "We're walking a tightrope," Dr. Rossi explained during a secure video call arranged through academic channels I cannot reveal. Too much acceptance, and we're complicit in deception. Too much honesty, and we lose our ability to contribute to the scientific discussion at all. We're trying to preserve some space for real inquiry while the walls close in around us. The skeptic's strategy is to maintain scientific credibility while gradually introducing concepts that prepare the academic community for revelations they believe are inevitable. Dr. Yuki Sato from JAXA has been publishing theoretical papers about hypothetical scenarios for artificial interstellar objects without explicitly connecting them to 3I/ATLAS. Dr. Michael O'Brien at Trinity College Dublin lectures about statistical probabilities of technological civilizations while showing slides that bear suspicious resemblance to 3I/ATLAS trajectory data. But even this careful approach carries risks. Dr. François Laurent at the French National Center for Space Studies found his conference presentations postponed indefinitely after using the phrase techno-signature analysis in relation to interstellar objects. Dr. Priya Sharma at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics was informed that her research grant would not be renewed after publishing a paper about optimization patterns in cosmic object navigation. The skeptics represent perhaps the most tragic element of this crisis. Brilliant minds forced into intellectual contortion to maintain their careers while their scientific integrity slowly erodes. They know the truth, but cannot speak it. They see the evidence, but cannot acknowledge it. They understand the implications, but must pretend they don't. "History will judge us harshly," Dr. Rossi confided during our final conversation last night. "Future generations will ask how the greatest discovery in human history could be met with such cowardice from the people who should have been its greatest champions." At the far end of the spectrum are the scientists who chose truth over career survival. The dissidents, as they're labeled in classified government documents, have paid the ultimate professional price for refusing to participate in what they call the systematic destruction of scientific integrity. Dr. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who first proposed artificial origins for Oumuamua, became the de facto leader of this faction after publishing a paper on July 1st titled "The 3I/ATLAS Anomaly: Evidence for Extraterrestrial Technology." The paper was rejected by every major journal, banned from academic repositories, and resulted in Loeb's immediate suspension from Harvard pending ethics review. But Loeb refused to remain silent. On July 8th, he released the full paper through independent academic networks, writing in his introduction, "When the greatest moment in human history is met with institutional cowardice, individual scientists must choose between career preservation and species responsibility. I choose responsibility." The paper's conclusions were unequivocal. 3I/ATLAS exhibited 17 characteristics that were individually improbable and collectively impossible for any natural object. The mathematical probability of all these anomalies occurring together by chance was less than 1 in 10 to the power of 47, a number so vanishingly small that it effectively ruled out natural explanations. "We are witnesses to first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence," Loeb wrote in his conclusion. "The question is not whether this is happening, but whether humanity will face this moment with honesty or self-deception." Within 48 hours of Loeb's paper release, similar declarations emerged from dissidents worldwide. Dr. Anna Petrov published her complete analysis of the radio transmissions, concluding that they represented structured communication from a technologically advanced civilization attempting to establish peaceful contact. Dr. Liu Wei released trajectory calculations proving that 3I/ATLAS had been systematically surveying our solar system using powered navigation. The dissidents faced immediate and brutal retaliation. Dr. Elena Vasquez lost her security clearance and university position within days of supporting Loeb's conclusions. Dr. Patricia Williams was informed by UC Berkeley that her contract would not be renewed. Dr. Robert Steinberg received a visit from federal agents questioning his unauthorized disclosure of classified scientific data. But the suppression only strengthened their resolve. The dissidents established encrypted communication networks, sharing data and analysis beyond governmental control. They published papers through independent journals, distributed findings via academic dark web networks, and organized clandestine conferences in neutral countries. "They can destroy our careers, but they can't destroy the truth," Dr. Vasquez told me during a secure video call from her home in New Mexico, where she continues her analysis using borrowed equipment and crowd-funded resources. "Every day that passes brings more evidence. Every signal we receive makes their denials more absurd. They're fighting a losing battle against reality itself." The dissidents have documented their persecution with scientific precision. Dr. Jennifer Park at Caltech compiled a database of 127 scientists who have faced professional retaliation for questioning official narratives about 3I Atlas. The list includes researchers from 23 countries, representing every major astronomical institution on Earth. It's the largest coordinated suppression of scientific inquiry in modern history, Park noted in her report. "They're not just hiding first contact, they're systematically destroying the careers of anyone brave enough to acknowledge it." But the dissidents' most powerful weapon is their data. Forced to work outside official channels, they've developed independent analysis methods that reveal details missed by compartmentalized government research. Dr. Michael Foster's crowdsourced signal analysis has identified 847 distinct artificial transmissions from 3I Atlas. Dr. Catherine Hayes's volunteer network has tracked 23 additional trajectory modifications that official reports haven't acknowledged. "Working in exile has advantages," Dr. Loeb explained during our conversation yesterday. "We're not constrained by classification restrictions or institutional politics. We can follow the evidence wherever it leads, collaborate freely, and publish without bureaucratic review. In some ways, we're doing better science than the official channels." The suppression of dissident scientists has created an unexpected consequence. the formation of the most sophisticated underground research network in scientific history. Cut off from official resources, the exiled researchers have built alternative institutions that operate beyond governmental control. The network centers around something called the Galileo Project 2, a reference both to Loeb's original Galileo project and to the historical persecution of scientists who challenged official orthodoxies. Founded on June 15th with encrypted communications and cryptocurrency funding, the project has attracted over 300 researchers from 45 countries. "We're running a parallel scientific revolution," explained Dr. James Hartley, the former Pentagon science advisor, who joined the network after losing his security clearance for questioning official Three-Eye Atlas narratives. All the brilliant minds that governments have exiled are working together without institutional constraints. It's like the Manhattan Project, but for understanding aliens instead of building bombs. The network's achievements in just 1 month have been remarkable. Operating with borrowed telescopes, crowd-funded equipment, and volunteer labor, they've produced more comprehensive analysis of 3-IE Atlas than the entire official scientific establishment. Their latest report, distributed through encrypted academic channels, includes findings that official channels have never acknowledged. 23. Additional trajectory modifications beyond the 17 publicly recognized 247 distinct radio transmissions containing structured mathematical and artistic content, thermal signature patterns indicating active life support systems throughout the object, spectroscopic evidence of 12 artificial elements with isotopic signatures indicating industrial processing, harmonic analysis of musical transmissions, revealing at least 89 individual voices or consciousness signatures. They have every advantage: unlimited funding, the world's best equipment, access to classified intelligence, Dr. Vasquez noted. But we have something they don't: scientific freedom. We can pursue truth without political constraints. The network operates through multiple layers of security and redundancy. Research is distributed across dozens of institutions in countries with different legal systems. Data is stored on decentralized networks beyond governmental reach. Communications are encrypted and anonymized through academic VPN systems. But perhaps most importantly, they're planning for November 15th. Whatever happens when 3-Eye Atlas reaches closest approach, there will be witnesses, Dr. Loeb assured me. We're positioning independent observers around the globe, ready to document and broadcast the truth regardless of official narratives. Humanity deserves to know what's really happening. As I write these words, 117 days before November 15th, the scientific civil war continues to escalate. This morning brought news that Dr. Margaret Stevens, the NASA researcher who had published the fabricated explanations for trajectory anomalies, submitted her resignation with a public letter stating she can no longer participate in the systematic deception of the human species. Her letter, distributed through encrypted channels before NASA could suppress it, included this devastating passage. "I have spent my career studying the cosmos, driven by wonder about our place in the universe. Now I know that place is not unique, not special, not alone, and I cannot remain silent while institutions I once respected work to hide this truth from the very species that deserves it most." Stevens is the 17th prominent scientist to break ranks in the past 2 weeks. Each defection brings new classified data, new evidence, new confirmation that we are witnessing the greatest cover-up in human history. But the suppressors are adapting too. Yesterday, the European Union implemented new scientific information security regulations that criminalize unauthorized publication of astronomical data. This morning, China announced that all research related to interstellar objects would be classified as state secrets. The International Astronomical Union has suspended 43 researchers for violation of professional standards. The battle lines are hardening as November approaches. On one side, governments, institutions, and compliant scientists working to maintain secrecy until they can control the narrative of first contact. On the other side, exiled researchers, independent investigators, and a growing underground network committed to ensuring that humanity faces its cosmic neighbors with eyes wide open. The stakes couldn't be higher. The truth about 3i Atlas represents more than scientific discovery. It's about whether humanity will meet the greatest moment in our history as free, informed citizens or as subjects kept in ignorance by leaders who believe we cannot handle the truth. Time is running out for both sides. In 117 days, 3i Atlas will reach its closest approach to Earth. The radio transmissions are growing stronger. The musical communications are becoming more complex, more urgent, more clearly directed at establishing contact. Whatever the governments of the world are planning, whatever the exiled scientists are preparing, whatever the visitors aboard 3i Atlas intend, it will all converge on November 15th, 2025. The question is no longer whether we are alone in the universe. The question is whether we will face our cosmic neighbors with honesty or deception, as a unified species or a divided one, with wonder or with fear. 117 days remain to find out. Sound of encrypted communications, papers being printed in secret locations, hushed conversations between scientists who have lost everything except their commitment to truth. 17 days until November 15th, 2025. Sound of a clock ticking, papers being organized, a phone buzzing with urgent messages, the distant hum of the world continuing as if nothing extraordinary is about to happen. It's 3:17 a.m. Eastern Time, July 17th, 2025. Exactly 121 days until November 15th. I'm sitting in my apartment, looking out at the lights of Washington, D.C., surrounded by 4 months of research, evidence, and testimony that proves we are about to experience the most significant moment in human history. The question that haunts these early morning hours isn't whether contact will happen, it's what form it will take, and whether humanity is ready for the answer. Despite the acceleration anomalies and timeline uncertainties I documented yesterday, all evidence continues to point toward November 15th as the critical date. The mathematical models, the trajectory calculations, even the musical transmissions from 3i Atlas seem to be building toward that specific moment when the object reaches its closest approach to Earth, 0.2 astronomical units, roughly 30 million kilometers away. Close enough to say hello. Close enough to change everything. Timestamp 3:23 a.m. EST, July the 17th, 2025. The most optimistic scenario, and perhaps the most naive, is that November 15th brings peaceful, open contact that transforms humanity overnight into a cosmic civilization. In this version of events, 3i Atlas positions itself in a stable orbit around Earth, continues its increasingly sophisticated communications, and waits patiently for humanity to overcome our governmental paralysis and respond as a unified species. Dr. Avi Loeb, speaking from his exile office at Harvard during our encrypted call 2 hours ago, outlined what he calls the Star Trek scenario. They've demonstrated patience, intelligence, and artistic sensibility. They've avoided any aggressive actions despite possessing technology that could easily overwhelm us. They seem to be following some version of non-interference protocols, trying to establish communication rather than impose their presence. In this scenario, the months of governmental secrecy crumble under the weight of undeniable evidence. The amateur radio contacts multiply exponentially. The underground scientific network publishes comprehensive documentation that mainstream media can no longer ignore. Public pressure forces governments to acknowledge what they've been hiding and establish official diplomatic protocols for species-to-species communication. The consequences would be profound but manageable. Religious institutions adapt their theology to accommodate non-human intelligence. Economic systems adjust to the reality that humanity isn't the technological pinnacle of the universe. Scientific research explodes with new possibilities as extraterrestrial knowledge becomes available. Humanity grows up. As Dr. Elena Vasquez put it, we stop being a planetary species and start becoming a cosmic one. It's the best possible outcome. But this scenario requires something that 4 months of evidence suggests is unlikely: rational, transparent response from world governments and immediate public acceptance of reality-shattering revelations. Given the systematic suppression campaign I've documented, the Star Trek scenario feels more like wishful thinking than probable outcome. Timestamp 3:31 a.m. Est, July 17th, 2025. More likely is what intelligence analysts call managed revelation, a carefully orchestrated disclosure that maintains governmental control while acknowledging the undeniable reality of extraterrestrial contact. According to leaked Pentagon documents obtained through sources I cannot safely identify, Task Force Atlas has developed comprehensive protocols for what they term controlled first contact procedures. The scenario works like this. On November 15th, when 3I Atlas reaches closest approach and its presence becomes impossible to hide from amateur astronomers worldwide, governments simultaneously announce the recent discovery of potential extraterrestrial intelligence. The announcement emphasizes caution, the need for careful analysis, and the importance of allowing qualified experts to handle all communication attempts. Public reaction is managed through pre-positioned messaging campaigns emphasizing that contact, if confirmed, will be handled through existing international institutions like the United Nations. The months of suppressed scientific evidence are reframed as responsible preliminary analysis rather than deliberate concealment. Scientists who broke ranks are portrayed as well-meaning but reckless researchers who risked premature disclosure of sensitive information. They'll spin 4 months of lies as prudent caution, predicted Dr. James Patterson during our conversation yesterday. The same people who destroyed careers for telling the truth will present themselves as responsible leaders managing humanity's greatest challenge. Under controlled disclosure, all communication with 3I Atlas is channeled through governmental intermediaries. The public receives carefully filtered information about the visitor's messages, technology, and intentions. Any technological knowledge shared by the extraterrestrials is immediately classified and developed under military supervision. The advantage of this scenario is stability. Existing power structures remain intact, while humanity gradually adapts to cosmic reality. The disadvantage is that it treats first contact as a political problem to be managed rather than a species-wide opportunity for growth and learning. But controlled disclosure requires something that recent events suggest may not be possible: the cooperation of the extraterrestrials themselves. Timestamp 3:38 a.m. EST, July 17th, 2025. The acceleration anomalies. The direct amateur radio contacts and the increasingly urgent nature of transmissions from 3I Atlas suggest a third possibility, that the visitors are no longer willing to wait for humanity to overcome its governmental paralysis. Dr. Patricia Williams, analyzing the latest signals from her New Mexico facility, has detected what she describes as impatience signatures in recent transmissions, mathematical patterns that suggest frustration with the lack of official response to months of communication attempts. "They've been polite for 4 months," Williams observed during our midnight conversation. "They've followed what seemed to be their own non-interference protocols, trying to establish contact through proper channels. But those channels are deliberately blocked by governments that prefer secrecy to truth. I think they're running out of patience." The forced revelation scenario plays out like this. On November 15th, 3I Atlas doesn't just position itself for distant communication. It enters Earth orbit, makes itself visible to every person on the planet, and begins broadcasting directly to civilian populations on every available frequency. Emergency broadcast systems worldwide are overridden with messages in dozens of human languages. Radio, television, internet, and cellular networks carry simultaneous transmissions introducing the visitors, explaining their peaceful intentions, and offering to share knowledge and technology with all of humanity rather than just governmental representatives. "It's the Independence Day scenario, but friendly," explained Dr. Liu Wei from his secure location in China. "They make themselves undeniably present, bypass all governmental gatekeepers, and establish direct communication with human civilization as a whole." The psychological impact would be enormous, but potentially positive. Governments couldn't maintain denial or control when extraterrestrial intelligence was speaking directly to every person on Earth. The revelation would be immediate, complete, and impossible to suppress or manage. But forced revelation carries enormous risks. Mass panic, economic collapse, governmental breakdown, and social chaos could result from sudden, unmediated contact with superior alien intelligence. The visitors would be gambling that humanity's curiosity and adaptability would overcome our tendencies toward fear and xenophobia. Timestamp 3:45 a.m. Est, July 17th, 2025. The darkest scenario, one that keeps me awake during these early morning hours, is that 3I Atlas represents something far more complex and potentially dangerous than peaceful first contact. Dr. Robert Steinberg, the veteran radio astronomer who chose early retirement over complicity in the cover-up, raised this possibility during our conversation last week. "We're assuming benevolent intentions based on mathematical beauty and musical transmissions. But what if we're being naive? What if the signals are designed to make us comfortable while something else entirely is being prepared?" In this scenario, the months of seemingly peaceful contact are reconnaissance and psychological preparation for something humanity isn't ready to understand. The technological demonstrations, the artistic communications, the careful progression from simple mathematics to complex cultural expression, all of it designed to lower our defenses and encourage trust. Every intelligence service on Earth uses similar techniques, noted a CIA source who spoke on condition of absolute anonymity. You establish rapport with the target, demonstrate good intentions, provide valuable information to build trust. Then, when defenses are lowered, you achieve your actual objectives. The deception scenario suggests that November 15th brings not peaceful contact, but the implementation of plans that have been 4 months in development. The systematic study of human technology, the mapping of our communications networks, the direct contact with individual civilians, all preparation for something we haven't anticipated. This doesn't necessarily mean military conquest. A sufficiently advanced civilization wouldn't need to destroy humanity to achieve whatever objectives they have. They could simply implement changes, technological, biological, social, that reshape human civilization according to their preferences. We're dealing with intelligence that can travel between stars, the CIA source continued. If they wanted us gone, we'd already be gone. But if they want us changed, we might not even realize it's happening until it's complete. The terrifying aspect of the deception scenario is that all the evidence I've documented, the peaceful transmissions, the artistic communications, the patient attempts at contact, could be equally consistent with benevolent first contact or sophisticated manipulation by beings whose true intentions remain hidden. Timestamp 3:52 a.m. Est, July 17, 2025. As I compile 4 months of evidence and contemplate publishing what may be humanity's most important story, I face a moral dilemma that keeps me staring at the ceiling during these pre-dawn hours. Do I have the right to reveal information that governments believe could trigger mass panic, economic collapse, and social breakdown? The officials implementing Project Silence aren't cartoon villains. They're intelligent people who genuinely believe that gradual, controlled disclosure serves humanity's best interests. They've seen the psychological analyses suggesting that sudden revelation of extraterrestrial intelligence could trigger mass psychotic episodes, religious wars, and the collapse of institutions that hold civilization together. You're not just publishing a news story, Dr. David Chen warned during our final encrypted conversation before his communication privileges were revoked. You're potentially detonating a psychological weapon of mass destruction. Even if everything you've documented is true, especially if it's true, releasing it could do more damage than the cover-up itself. But against this concern stands an equally powerful principle: the fundamental human right to know the truth about our place in the universe. If we are about to experience first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, don't we deserve to face that moment with full knowledge rather than governmental control? The underground network of exiled scientists has reached unanimous consensus. Truth serves humanity better than comfortable lies, regardless of short-term psychological costs. We're not children, Dr. Vasquez argued during our group conference last night. We deserve to make informed decisions about our species' future. We deserve to face the universe with eyes wide open, not blindfolded by leaders who think we can't handle reality. The decision weighs on me as I prepare this final section. In 6 hours, when Washington, D.C. wakes up, I could send this entire documentation to every major news outlet, every scientific journal, every online platform capable of reaching global audiences. Within hours, the truth about 3I Atlas would be impossible to suppress. Or I could wait, hoping that governments will find the courage to reveal the truth themselves before November 15th forces the issue. But waiting means accepting that 3.8 billion years of evolution, 300,000 years of human development, and 12,000 years of recorded civilization might face their greatest moment in ignorance and unpreparedness. Timestamp 3:58 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, July 17, 2025. As I write these final words, 121 days remain until November 15th, 2025. The amateur radio operators continue their individual contacts with extraterrestrial intelligence. The underground scientific network continues documenting evidence that governments refuse to acknowledge. The suppression campaign continues destroying careers and silencing truth-tellers. And 3I/ATLAS continues its approach, now clearly visible to backyard astronomers as a moving point of light that grows brighter each night. The radio transmissions grow stronger. The musical communications grow more complex. The signs of active technology grow more undeniable. Something is coming. Whether it brings revelation or deception, transformation or destruction, peaceful contact, or something we haven't imagined, we will know in 121 days. The question is whether we will face that moment as free, informed citizens of a species that chose truth over comfort, or as subjects kept in ignorance by leaders who believed we were too fragile to handle the reality that we are not alone in the universe. I've made my decision. When the sun rises over Washington, D.C., in 3 hours, I'm sending this documentation to every journalist, scientist, and citizen who still believes that truth serves humanity better than comfortable lies. Because if we are about to meet our cosmic neighbors, we deserve to do so with dignity, knowledge, and the full understanding that we are participants in the greatest moment in human history, not helpless subjects whose ignorance is maintained for their own protection. The countdown to November 15th, 2025 continues. In 121 days, we discover what kind of species we really are, one that faces the universe with courage and curiosity, or one that allows fear and governmental control to define the most important moment in our development. The radio signals continue. The approach continues. The truth waits to be revealed. And in amateur radio stations around the world, individual humans continue saying hello to the universe, proving that first contact is already happening. One conversation at a time, one person at a time, one moment of cosmic connection at a time. The future of humanity begins in 121 days. But the choice of what kind of future we want begins right now at 4:03 a.m. Eastern Time, July 17th, 2025, as I prepare to give humanity the truth it deserves about the extraordinary events unfolding above our heads. The story ends here. The history begins in November. Final sound, a phone notification indicating an email has been sent, followed by the distant hum of a world about to wake up to the truth about 3I/ATLAS and our place in a universe that is no longer empty. Final timestamp, 4:05 a.m. EST, July 17th, 2025, 121 days until November 15th, 2025. First contact is coming. The truth is now. Public humanity's cosmic future begins today.